Welcome back to the deep dive. So, you want to take a closer look at a cult classic,
Mm,
a deep dive into the 1988 film The Wraith.
all right.
I think that'll be a really fun one.
Yeah.
It's a pretty cool movie, a captivating blend of action mystery
Yeah.
and supernatural revenge.
Yeah, it's interesting how it takes this small desert town obsessed with street racing and turns it into something so much more than just an action flick.
Right, and a lot of that has to do with Charlie Sheen's character, Jake.
Yeah.
He comes into town with a hidden agenda and a connection to the world beyond the veil.
It's wild that Sheen himself didn't even know about the whole supernatural angle
Mhm.
surrounding his character until pretty late into filming.
Oh, really?
Yeah, apparently he was kept in the dark about it.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Ah,
That actually makes a lot of sense, though. The mystery kind of becomes part of the character.
exactly.
So we've got this mysterious hero with a possible link to the afterlife.
Right.
And on the other side, we've got the villain Packard, played by the always intense Nick Cassavetes.
Oh, he's great in it. The head of this brutal street gang.
Definitely more than just your typical bad guy, though.
How so?
Well, one of the sources we have describes him as embodying this toxic masculinity that was really prevalent in the 80s.
Oh, interesting.
But he represents everything Jake and the audience are fighting against.
Okay, so you're saying that the depth of his villainy makes the revenge plot even more satisfying.
Exactly. It's more like a fight for justice than just a personal vendetta.
It's interesting how the movie uses Packard to represent something larger than himself.
Definitely.
He becomes a symbol of something.
Right.
Even in these kind of straightforward action films, villains can reflect societal anxieties or fears.
Absolutely. And The Wraith uses the backdrop of street racing and the supernatural conflict to delve into some deeper themes.
Right.
And speaking of power,
Yeah.
we can't talk about this film without mentioning the car.
Oh, the car.
The legendary 1987 Dodge M4S Turbo Interceptor.
Yeah, that car is basically a character in itself.
Oh, for sure. Sleek, futuristic, and with this mysterious ability to just vanish.
Yeah, like magic.
It's the perfect way to show Jake's otherworldly power.
And to think that there was only one ever made,
Really.
just for the movie.
Wow.
A prototype designed by Chrysler.
Huh.
They wanted to push the boundaries of car design in the 80s.
That makes sense.
And the film really capitalizes on that futuristic aesthetic.
Right.
The car becomes this symbol of Jake's connection to a realm beyond our understanding.
Oh, I like that.
You could even say it's an extension of his spirit,
Yeah.
or even his weapon in this battle against Packard and his gang.
That's a great way to put it.
It's way more than just a cool car.
Right.
It's key to the whole atmosphere and concept of the film.
Yeah, I agree.
And the special effects, especially for 1988, really bring the car's supernatural abilities to life.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Like in that scene where...
Oh, hold on.
Well-
Before we spoil too much for our
Oh,
listener,
good point.
let's step back for a second and look at the bigger picture. A lot of sources compare The Wraith to movies like The Crow,
Right.
Mad Max,
Right.
and even No Country for Old Men.
No Country for Old Men.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Pretty diverse.
Yeah, how does a movie with a super-powered car even end up in the same conversation as those films?
Well, it's all about the film's unique tone.
Right.
It blends dark humor,
Hmm.
serious themes of vengeance and redemption, and this very distinct 80s aesthetic,
Right.
all tied together with this awesome synth-heavy soundtrack featuring classics like Shout by Tears for Fears.
Oh, yeah. The music is great in this movie.
It really captures the mood, that
Absolutely.
rebellious, otherworldly feel.
For sure. So, going back to those comparisons to other films,
Yeah.
obviously it has elements of the supernatural revenge story like The Crow, but the desert setting and lone avenger going up against a gang of bad guys,
Right.
that definitely brings Mad Max to
A
mind.
little bit. Yeah, but what's really interesting is the comparison to No Country for Old Men.
Wait, how does a supernatural revenge flick with a superpowered car even resemble a neo-Western thriller like No Country for Old Men? That seems like a stretch.
Well, think about it this way.
Okay.
Both films are grappling with themes of justice, the consequences of violence, and the idea that good and evil can get kind of blurry.
Right.
Both explore that moral ambiguity of revenge
Oh, okay.
and how pursuing it can have these unforeseen and potentially devastating consequences.
Okay, I see the connection now.
Yeah.
It's amazing how a film like The Wraith, with its car chases and supernatural elements, can also touch on these really profound ideas.
Exactly, and that's what sets it apart from just a simple action movie.
Right.
It asks these difficult questions, explores the gray areas of morality,
Right.
and does it all in this visually stylish and entertaining story.
So we've got a mysterious hero, a truly despicable villain, a car that defies the laws of physics, and this mix of genres that keeps you on the edge of your seat.
Yeah, it's a wild ride.
But we've only just scratched the surface, haven't we?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
There's still the whole cult following the deeper meaning behind those Western influences, and the surprisingly genuine romance in the story.
Lots to unpack.
I'm ready to go deeper. What's next?
All right, let's do it. Well, let's talk about that cult following you mentioned.
Yeah.
It's pretty fascinating how a film that wasn't a huge hit when it came out can build such a devoted fan base years, even decades later.
It seems like the Wraith has really resonated with specific groups of people, especially those who are into car culture, 80s nostalgia, and stories that blend genres in unexpected ways.
Right.
There are even online forums dedicated to dissecting the film's deeper meaning and speculating on its unanswered questions.
Makes sense. It feels like a film that you could watch multiple times and still catch new details or connections you missed before.
Totally. And some sources even suggest that the film's ambiguity and open-ended nature contribute to its cult status.
Right. It leaves room for interpretation.
Yeah.
All those fan theories add layers to the story and spark debates among the people who love it.
It's like a puzzle that invites the audience to participate in solving it.
Exactly.
You mentioned the Western influences earlier.
Yeah.
I'm really curious about that one source even called Jake a futuristic gunslinger.
Interesting, right?
Yeah. How does that idea play out in the film?
Think about the classic Western archetype. The lone rider who comes to a town overrun by lawlessness and takes on a powerful, corrupt force.
Okay.
He's usually a man of few words, driven by his own code of justice.
Right.
That description fits Jake pretty well.
Yeah. He does have that quiet intensity,
Hmm.
that sense of purpose that goes beyond words.
And the Dodge M4S becomes his high-tech horse, so to speak,
Right.
allowing him to outmaneuver and outgun his opponents.
I see what you mean. So the desert setting also reinforces that Western vibe.
Oh, absolutely. It creates this sense of isolation and lawlessness where the usual rules don't really apply.
So it's like justice in this environment has to be delivered by someone who operates outside the system. And Jake, with his supernatural abilities and mysterious origins, definitely fits that bill.
He's like a force of nature, an avenging spirit who appears out of nowhere to right the wrongs that have gone unpunished.
I like that the film even uses visuals that remind us of Westerns.
Yeah, how so?
Those wide shots of the desert landscape create a sense of epic scope and dramatic tension.
Right, like the final showdown between Jake and Packard. It has all the elements of a classic Western duel.
Except with supercharged cars instead of six-shooters.
Exactly.
Wow, so it's not just a superficial resemblance?
No.
The Western influences run deep. They shape the themes, the characters, even the way the movie looks. It's
Yeah.
really making me understand why this movie has connected with so many people for so long.
And speaking of things that resonate, let's not forget about the romance between Jake and Carrie.
Oh, yeah.
It's surprisingly touching and genuine.
It is, especially for a film that's full of action and intrigue.
It adds emotional depth to the story.
It shows us that Jake, despite his powers and thirst for vengeance, is still capable of human connection.
Right, he's not just some emotionless killing machine.
Yeah, and it's not just a subplot thrown in for the sake of sentimentality either.
No, it's actually important to Jake's quest.
Right, he's not just seeking revenge for himself.
Yeah.
He's fighting to protect Carrie and create a world where she can be safe.
It gives him a deeper purpose.
So it's not just about retribution, it's about love and hope for the future.
Exactly, and that idea of love transcending death and inspiring acts of heroism is really powerful.
Yeah, it's a universal theme.
It's what gives the film its emotional core
Yeah.
and elevates it beyond a simple revenge story.
You've really highlighted how much is going on beneath the surface of the Wraith.
There's a lot to unpack.
It's action-packed and entertaining, but it also deals with complex themes and offers moments of genuine emotion. No wonder it has such a devoted following.
It's a film that rewards you for paying close attention and watching it more than once.
Right?
And its influence can be seen in a lot of the films and TV shows that came after it, especially those that combine action, sci-fi, and even horror.
So we've covered the plot, the characters, the themes, the influences, and the cult following.
We've touched on a lot, yeah.
But one question keeps coming back to me.
What's that?
What is it about the Wraith specifically that has made it endure and continue to captivate audiences?
It's a great question. Maybe it's the way it captures that specific moment in time, the 1980s, with its music, its fashion, its overall vibe.
Okay.
But it also explores those timeless themes of love loss and the battle between good and evil.
Right.
It's a film that speaks to our desires for justice and freedom, and it does it with style, humor, and genuine heart.
And let's not forget about that car.
Right.
The Dodge M4S is a symbol of power and rebellion that still fascinates car enthusiasts and movie buffs today.
Yeah, it's one of those vehicles that becomes part of pop culture.
Absolutely, but I think it's the combination of all these elements that makes the Wraith so special.
I agree.
It's this unique mix of genres and ideas that somehow works perfectly together.
It's a weird recipe, but it works.
It creates a film that's both entertaining and thought-provoking.
You mentioned that the film's influence can be seen in later works.
Yeah.
Can you give some specific examples?
Sure.
Well, it's hard to pinpoint direct influence.
Right.
But I think The Wraith helped pave the way for a wave of films and TV shows that embraced a similar mix of genres and visual styles.
Okay.
Think about the rise of superhero films, for example,
Okay.
with their focus on extraordinary individuals battling against forces of darkness.
So you're saying that the idea of a seemingly ordinary person with hidden powers using them to fight for justice is a recurring theme in a lot of superhero stories.
Yeah, and visually, The Wraith helped make a certain aesthetic, popular, sleek, futuristic, often set in these dark, neon-lit places.
Oh, I see what you mean.
You can see echoes of that style in movies like The Matrix,
Okay.
Blade Runner 2049,
Yeah.
and even some of the more visually ambitious superhero films.
It's amazing to think that a film like The Wraith, made on a relatively small budget and without huge commercial success, could have such a lasting impact
It's true.
on the visual language and storytelling of modern cinema.
It shows you the power of originality and creativity.
Right.
It can plant these seeds that grow into these unexpected and far-reaching influences,
Interesting.
shaping how we tell stories
Yeah.
and experience the world through film. Now, before we wrap up this deep dive,
Yeah.
there's one last thing I think is worth talking about.
Okay.
It goes back to the question of how this film still resonates with people today.
I'm intrigued. What haven't we covered yet?
Well, we've discussed revenge and redemption,
Right.
but I think there's also this subtle commentary on car culture itself that's worth mentioning.
Okay, tell me more.
The Wraith was released when street racing was becoming more popular, and the film both glorifies and critiques that subculture.
Okay, how so?
On one hand, the car chases are exhilarating and visually stunning.
Yeah.
They tap into that desire for speed and power.
Right, and the Dodge M4S is presented as this almost mythical object of desire,
Right.
a symbol of freedom and coolness.
But the film also shows us the dangers of reckless driving and the potential consequences of pushing things too far.
Right.
Some characters meet pretty tragic ends because of their obsession with speed and competition.
So it's not just glorifying car culture.
No, it's showing us the dark side too, the recklessness, the potential for destruction.
I see, so it's reflecting our own complicated relationship with cars.
Exactly.
They can be symbols of freedom,
Mm-hmm.
but they can also be dangerous,
Right.
even deadly.
The Wraith isn't just celebrating car culture, it's starting a conversation about it.
I like that.
It makes us think about the role of cars in our lives and the responsibility that comes with that power.
That's a really interesting point, and it's something that's still relevant today.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Especially as cars get more and more powerful and technology blurs the lines between human control and automation.
You've given me a lot to think about. I'm seeing The Wraith in a whole new light now. It's
Oh.
not just an entertaining action flick. It's a film that's deeply connected to its time and raises questions that are still relevant decades later.
Exactly. And that's what makes it such a fascinating topic for a deep dive.
For sure.
But before we move on, I want to go back to something you said earlier.
What's that?
You mentioned those unanswered questions and fan theories surrounding the Wraith.
Right.
I think that speaks to the film's lasting power. It sparks our imagination,
Uh-huh.
makes us want to fill in the gaps, create our own interpretations of its mysteries.
It's a film that keeps giving even after it's over.
Exactly. And that's what makes it a cult classic.
Now, I know you're excited to hear about a modern remake of The Wraith,
I am.
and we'll definitely get to that.
We will.
But first, I think it's important to appreciate the original for what it is.
I agree.
A flawed but fascinating work of art that's captivated audiences for over 3 decades.
The Wraith deserves that recognition.
Mm-hmm.
It dared to be different, to blend genres in unexpected ways, and to create a world that's both familiar and otherworldly.
It's a film that has stayed with me even before this deep dive,
Same here.
and now, having explored it in more detail, I appreciate it even more.
I think our listener probably feels the same way.
Yeah, I'm sure they do. Speaking of our listener, we should probably wrap things up
Okay.
and get to that thought-provoking question we have for them.
Sounds good.
Are you ready? Okay, so we've talked about a lot when it comes to The Wraith.
We have.
The plot, the characters, the themes, the influences,
Hmm,
even how it connects to bigger cultural trends.
right.
But now it's your turn, our listener.
Yeah, we want to hear from you.
What would you do if you were in charge of reimagining the Wraith for a modern audience?
What would you keep and what would you change?
There's no right or wrong answer here. We just want to get you thinking creatively.
Let's start with the core themes of the film. Revenge, redemption, love transcending death, the battle between good and evil.
Yeah, do those themes still resonate today?
Would you emphasize them differently or maybe add some new thematic elements that reflect modern issues?
And what about the characters? Would you keep them pretty much the same or give them a modern update?
Jake's stoic, mysterious persona might work well in a contemporary setting.
Right, but could we see a more complex, emotionally vulnerable side to him?
And Packard, the villain who embodies toxic masculinity,
Right.
would he be a different kind of villain in today's world?
Maybe someone who uses manipulation and control instead of brute force.
It's interesting to think about how those character dynamics might change in a modern context.
And of course, we can't forget about the car.
You know,
It's hard to picture the Wraith without the iconic Dodge M4S Turbo Interceptor.
right, but how would you update it for a 21st century audience?
What would its design and capabilities be like?
Would it be a sleek electric supercar?
Or maybe a self-driving car with a mind of its own.
The possibilities are endless, and it's exciting to imagine how those technological advancements could be incorporated into the story.
But it's not just technology that has changed since 1988.
Right, the visual style of film has also evolved dramatically.
So would you keep that 80s aesthetic with the neon lights, the synth music, and the over-the-top action?
Or would you go for a more grounded, gritty feel?
And what about the supernatural elements? Would you lean into them making it a full-blown fantasy thriller?
Or would you set the story in a more realistic world, maybe exploring Jake's abilities as a psychological thing?
So many things to consider. This is a great way to engage with the Wraith on a deeper level,
Is
to take it apart and put it back together in a way that reflects your own creative vision.
it shows how impactful the original film is, that it can still inspire these kinds of conversations.
And creative reimaginings.
Exactly. And who knows, maybe this deep dive will spark an idea in someone out there,
Right?
leading to a truly innovative remake of The Wraith for the 21st century.
That would be amazing. But even if a remake never happens, we hope this deep dive has given you a new appreciation for the original,
We've explored its historical context,
its thematic depth,
its visual style.
and its enduring cultural influence.
Right, and we've challenged you to think about how those elements could be reinterpreted for today's audience.
And that's really what the deep dive is all about. Sparking curiosity, inspiring you to explore further, and empowering you to engage with the world in a more meaningful way.
So thank you for joining us on this journey into the world of The Wraith.
We hope you enjoyed it.
And we can't wait to dive into another fascinating topic with you soon.